He gives me a shot of heroin before I get on the bus. And I sit down and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm sitting in God's lap. This is the most amazing feeling I've ever had. I could really, and I puked all over the ground. I puked on my shoes. The guy I was sitting next to was asleep, and there's this big puddle of puke next to us. And I quietly moved away.
Come on, man. Hey everybody, I'm Drew with Sobriety Daily, and I am here with my friend Matt. And Matt's gonna give us his shtick. So hit me, Matt. Go for it. It's good to see you, bud.
Good to see you. So usually when people ask me why I got sober, I usually start off and tell them it's if they didn't know me, I was basically a garbage person living a garbage life, thinking that I was the best person living the Ritz. Thought I had it all figured out. So I think the best way to describe who I was as a garbage person before I got sober is just to kind of take you through a daily night of mine. So first off, I would go to the bar with the intention, I'd have three goals. The first goal was to meet a supermodel who was under 6 feet tall and had low self-esteem so I could take her home. And then the other goal was to sell fake drugs to people so that I could buy real drugs and get on with my life. And I'll tell you about the time I broke my arm. That's the best way to do it. The night things went wrong. So I go to the bar and I was actually having a really good night. I had talked somebody in with money in, and they had let me go buy them some stuff. They'd given me their money without needing anything in return. And that was like my best way to steal things from people. So I was heading up, and I was in Morro Bay, and I was pretty wasted. I'd taken a couple of morphine, and I'd been drinking on a tab, somebody else's tab all night long. And I'm walking, and I had a relationship with the police officers at this point, and we were playing this game. It was this tweaker and cat game where they would see me, and they would say, "Hey, Matt," and I would take that as them saying "go." And I would run for it. So they would chase me, and if I could get to a tree before they could tackle me, I would climb that tree, and I'd get to the top of that tree, and I would start negotiating the terms of my surrender. But it was jacked, So I did that all the time, and like one time I was on the bottom branch, I like jumped up, and they tased me, and they got me right in the back and in the ass, and I fell to the ground, and like. I don't know if you've ever been tased before, but it's not like a one-shot deal. They didn't like keep pushing the trigger. And every time they'd push the trigger, I'd start breakdancing on the ground, and they'd all start laughing at me. And I would pee a little bit every time. And then when they take me to jail, I had piss all down my pants. And I kept yelling at the guy. I'm like, dude, you know how embarrassing this is? I got to make friends when I go in there. And I got pee all over my pants. And well, no one's going to want to talk to me. And he's like, they just laughed at me. I thought it was ridiculous. So this particular night, I was heading by, and a cop pulled up, and he was real sly about it. So he had me trapped. There was no trees by. I had no escape. He had me cornered by this house, and he said, "Hey, Matt." And instead of running, because I had nowhere to run, I said, "I know why you're always fucking with me." And this is where I say it was his mistake, right? Because he could have said nothing and just arrested me, and there would have been no problem. But instead he said why, which I felt like was opening me up for a response. And I told him, it's probably because I fucked your wife. And which I didn't even know your wife.
No, are you serious?
Yeah, I said it just came right out of my mouth. Like
your mouth is legendary.
Yeah, it's written some pretty big checks, and I've had a hard time cashing them my whole life. And this turned out to be one of those scenarios because he fucking whooped my ass. Him and his friend jumped out of their car and just started hitting me with sticks and flashlights. And I was like screaming for help. Like there was no real fight. And then they get me in the back of the car, and at this point my feelings are a little hurt, so I decide I'm just gonna talk shit the whole time. And then he gets me, they doesn't even take me to the police station. He goes right to Kansas Street, right to the jail, which I thought was rude. I should be able to stop by Go and collect $200. And then he gets me out of the car, and I'm pretty wasted, but I'm a little Irishman, so I do pretty good when I'm tipsy. And he pushes me against the car, And I leaned into the car and I bounced off of it and I leaned my shoulder into him and I got him right in the solar plex and he fell. And it was a beautiful sight to watch this cop fall right on his stupid ass. And he hit the ground and I'm standing above him smiling and he's looking at me and I hear these like charging and I look over and these 4 guards, huge guards, are charging me. And I realized I was beat and I decided that I was going to give an Indian war cry and charge back. And I did. I run full screaming, running right at these guys. It was a huge mistake, bro. Giant mistake. And if I could take any of my mistakes back, that one would definitely be one that I took back. It was like running into a brick wall. I'm not a big guy. They were all big. I can't even believe they sent 4 of them out there. So I don't know if you've ever been taken into jail while you're being combative, but they got to get your clothes off you so they can search you. So these 4 guards took and take me into the jail where I'm like screaming and yelling and fighting and kicking. And they throw me down and I got 1 guard on each leg and 1 guard on each arm. And they're cutting my clothes off me. And having my clothes ripped off me in jail has always been a fear of mine. So
naturally, that sounds like a very realistic fear. I don't think anyone's going to judge you for having that be this lingering thing that you're just kind of generally scared of.
Yeah, well, you know, it's really not the clothes coming off. It's the action afterwards that I was real scared of. Like, that's what I was trying to avoid. But so there was 1 guard holding my head down while they were doing it, and his hand slipped by my mouth. And I'm a little guy, and I believe if fighting was fair, we'd all be the same size. So I took the opportunity to bite him. And I bit down like a wild animal. Like I wanted to bite his fucking finger off. So I bite this guy and he screams and the guy on my arm snaps it. I hear it. It snaps in the end. And I let go at that point and I yelled the words, "I'm done." I was like, "Uncle." I tried to call Uncle, but they weren't playing fair. And then they, have you ever seen Crocodile Hunter? You know, when they like let the crocodile go and you always wonder why he just sits there like an idiot.
Yeah.
It's because he's probably drunk and he's got no idea what's going on. Because they did that to me. They went 1, 2, 3, go, and they just all ran out of the room, and I didn't even move. I was like,
I gotta ask, what is your level of consciousness? Like on a scale of like 1 to 10, what is your decision-making power? Like hands in the mouth. How much time do you actually have to think before you think, I'm gonna go for it? Like, or is it it full knee jerk?
I assume it's a lot like a fish taking a hook. I looked at that and was like, ooh, candy. Got no thought at all. I was like, oh, great. And I've always I've been in a lot of fights, right? But I've got like a 35 to 40% success rate. So like I've gotten my ass handed to me way too many times, easily 15 to 20 times, to the point where my whole face was swollen up. And I've always thought that while losing a fight, I really like to get a real good hit in there. Like that's my goal. Is I'm hoping.
Is it almost worth it?
Oh, not at all. It's never worth it, but sometimes it feels like it. Dude, I remember I was drinking Natty Light and taking shots of tequila, and I was living in Tucson, and I lived next to real gangsters, and they started bumping mariachi music, so I started throwing empty beer cans over the wall at them. And I'm like trying to hit these guys with beer cans over the wall, and we were gonna have a rumble, me versus all 4 of them in the parking lot. And I come running out there to fight them, and so I don't even get one swing, and I do like a wild swing, and they take me to the ground, and it's just all I remember is like feet, a bunch of feet and dirt, and then so they're kicking me, and they start to walk away, but I'm still pretty drunk, so I get up and I chase them, and I try to tackle one of them, and it was like I didn't even get him to the ground. I like grabbed his leg and slid to the ground, and then they got me by like my face against his tire, and it was just all foot, tire, foot, tire, foot, tire. And then I went to sleep, and I wake up out there and my ear was hanging off of my head. So I go into the bathroom, right? I take a couple of shots to try to kill the pain, and I push it against my head like it's gonna like a Velcro, and I try to get it to re-stick onto my ear. And then eventually it wouldn't stick, so I had to take the city bus in Tucson, down to the hospital to get them to re-stitch my ear back on. And nobody would
Wow.
sit next to me. My feelings were super hurt. Like, I didn't get it. There was just blood down my arm. That's like the second time I was on the bus too, covered in blood.
That was the second time.
Wondering, yeah, in Tucson, they'll let you on the bus. If at that point it was 60 cents. If you had 60 cents, they'd let you on. They didn't care.
How long did your drinking start? When did it start like this, and how long did it continue in this fashion?
So it probably got out of control when I was about 15. I think that's when I stopped living inside either my parents' home. So like 15 and a half, I was pretty much on my own at that point. And once I was no longer under the ward of somebody, I was drinking horribly. I just never really got the whole, I can control this and I'm doing well. I was always the guy who was like, well, if there's a line, we should push it. So it went on for a long time like that. I stopped when I was like 24. Like I started using intravenous drugs when I was after I got out of rehab. So at one point I fled Tucson in the middle of the night for I had a disagreement with somebody, and he ended up with a hole in his foot, and I thought it was time for me to leave. So I went up to my dad and asked him for help. And my dad misunderstood me. I said I wanted help, but what I wanted a new name, a place to live, a credit card, and I needed a new car. And what he thought I meant by help was I needed to go to rehab. And me and my dad argued about it. I remember staying up and arguing with him about it, and then going to sleep, and then waking up in rehab. And be like, well, I guess I lost that argument.
He just picked you up in the middle of the night and just like, all right, this is happening.
I talked to him later about it, and he's like, yeah, you went to sleep, you woke up and you're like really cool about the whole thing. I was having these like whiteouts where I'd lose like a whole week of my day. Like, cause I was diabetic. So like my blood sugar would be, I am diabetic. So my blood sugar would be like 400 plus. So like, I was not encoding any new information. I had like this weird anterior grade amnesia where it's just, I'd have these like weeks where I didn't know what happened. And I'd be in like a new place with new people. I'd wake up next to I was on a couch, and all of a sudden I'm sitting next to a guy, and me and him are best friends. And I never met that dude before. I've told him my whole life story. Wow. So that happened. Yeah. So I had one of those episodes and then ended up in rehab in it. But
did the rehab stick?
No, but it got me okay knowing where AA was. So I was in rehab for like 3 weeks. I had dried out, and they were making me go into the office to test my blood sugar. And I go into the office to test my blood sugar, and these two guys start fighting out in the kitchen, and everybody runs out of the office, and they had just confiscated a bunch of Oxycontins from this dude. And it was just sitting there. They just left Matt, the drug addict, in front of a box of Oxycontins. Thing. It was like he had them in this vitamin D container. I remember, and I knew it was in there, and it's like glowing, and I was like, oh shit, there is a God. And I poured them in my pocket, and then I made my roommate give me, like, every time I had to get drug tested, I made him pee in a bottle for me. I'd tell him I couldn't pee, and then I just walk around with this cup until I could get alone and pour this clean pee in there. And I went all the way through rehab. I remember when they coined out, I was having a hard time with double vision, and I was pretty sure I was going to throw up under my socks. And everybody was telling me how proud they were. And I was like, you just shut up. Like, I did way too much.
You're like, I've never been so high for so long ever in my entire life. Dude, that's like something out of like a Tarantino movie or something, where you go to rehab and two guys fight and out jumps this bottle of oxygen. Like, there's no way. There's no way.
I was like, that's how I knew there was a God. It was right. I don't know why they were letting me in there.
That's ridiculous, man.
It's like,
okay, all right. So you meet AA at some level, and whatever. I'm surprised you remember any of that. But so you do at least know that it exists from there. You're like, okay, some people do have problems with alcohol, and they go to a place called AA when they think they can't deal with it anymore. Okay, cool. Now I know it's there.
Yeah, well, I knew I had a problem. I knew I had a problem then. I just didn't care. I didn't want to change anything. I knew I had a problem, but I also knew that the way you AA people looked like you lived your life seemed boring. My life was exciting, if it was unpredictable and exciting, if not chaotic and insane. But it looked good on paper. I was like, I'm cool. I do cool things. I'm just picking up stories.
Well, you did a good job picking up stories. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that.
Yeah, it's funny because when I look back, I'm like, man, that was some dumb shit. Like, that's not problem solving skills at all. Like, that's the problem solving skills of a chihuahua.
Okay, all right. So you get out of rehab. How do you wind up progressing? Where does this go? I don't even know.
So out of rehab, I end up in Reading with a friend of mine, and
you wind up in some crappy towns, man. You're like, yeah, I'm in Tucson. Now I'm in Reading. Like, tell me you don't make it to Los Banos or.
Yeah, I didn't know there was nicer places. Besides, I fit in great there. You know, I go into a place like Reading, and all of a sudden I go from being a 6 to an 8.
Hard 8. You're like a hard 8 in Reading. Yeah,
really do her a favor. So I'm there, and I'm starting to like really get sick now. Like I'm going to the hospital all the time. I'd go to the hospital about every 3 weeks, and I'd end up staying there about a week at a time. And usually when I go to the hospital, I don't give them a real name because I don't want to pay hospital bills. So I go in there and I'll tell them like my name's Johnny Won't Pay. They're like Patrick Broke Ass. And then and tell them I'm homeless. And then with no ID, they just got to take you anyways because you're dying. And then one of these days one of the times I went in there, I had lost consciousness before I went in there, and somebody had told them my real name. So I ended up telling them, giving them my mom's number. They needed a number, and then they called her, and then she told me I talked to her, and she asked me if I was still on drugs. So I promptly lied and told her I wasn't on drugs. It was just a bunch of bad luck. And then she said I could come and live with her in Morro Bay. So I hopped on a Greyhound bus, and I ended up in the hospital before I got there. So I get on this Greyhound bus, and the guy is going to give me a ride there. As I never tried heroin before, but it really seemed like it was going to be my deal. So when my buddy was like, hey, let's let me show you how to do this. He gives me a shot of heroin before I get on the bus. And I sit down and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm sitting in God's lap. This is the most amazing feeling I've ever had. I could really, and I puked all over the ground. I puked on my shoes. The guy I was sitting next to was asleep, and there's this big puddle of puke next to us. And I quietly moved away.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I went to the back. It still smelled back there, but the floor wasn't as sticky, so it wasn't so bad. That guy I don't know. Didn't see him when he got up. So I ended up in Sacramento, right? I'm waiting for a transfer. But I'm super sick at this point. I can like barely stand up. And I decided that ice chips were going to be what was going to make me better. And I didn't even have 15 cents. Like, I didn't have any money at all. And I go in there and I tell them, hey, I'm diabetic. I need ice chips. If you don't give them to me, I'm going to be really sick. And they were like, yeah, fuck you, drug addict. Get out of here. Ice chips cost money. Like, go beg for change. So I got mad and I lay down on the floor and told them to call an ambulance. And then they called security instead of an ambulance. And he drug me out, halfway out of where the ice chips were before he heard me saying I'm diabetic. And then I ended up in the hospital there for a week. And they were really nice there, actually. A lot of the time, the nurses, I'd start spitting game to them, telling them, oh, I got a bad life. you should, and then I could get them to usually give me some money. So I'd get out of the hospital and I'd have a couple of bottles of insulin and $30-$40 in cash that they all pulled together. It's a good stop for me if I hadn't been to that hospital before. But it was good though, because I got to end up in Morro Bay and I looked clean, cleaner. So I wasn't dope sick or anything because I kicked in the hospital. And I decided I wasn't going to do any drugs when I got to Morro Bay. These things are really bad. They're clearly not working out for me. I'm not going to do them anymore. And I didn't until I left the house. Like when I stayed in my mom's house, I was good for like 4 or 5 days.
Okay. So is this the first time you've ever came to Morro Bay, or are you like coming home?
No, I had been to Morro Bay once before when I was a kid. So I used to go out. My dad lives in Monterey. I lived in Carmel, right? So I'd go out there and I'd spend the summers and winters with him, and we would just surf and work on the house up until I was about 15, when I became just the most rotten teenager that you'd ever met in your life. So I would been down to Morro Bay a couple of times because my uncle had a house down here, and I would come down here and I'd bring a surfboard and I'd surf out at a beach. And usually, you know, when I came out here, if you just gave me a surfboard and some space, I would manage not to vandalize your home. So it was like a new town for me. But
and this is the same Morro Bay where you get to know. This is the same Morro Bay where you get to know all the cops, where you get to know everybody eventually. This is the same place, right?
Yeah, this is where I made a name for myself, or as a clown.
All right. So I'm assuming that the arm breaking thing happens after you get to Morro Bay, right?
Yeah, that happens about 4 years after. That's like right towards the end. So I broke that arm, and then as that arm was healing. No, they broke it at jail. It was the county guard, the guard who was on my left arm as I decided to try to chew the hand off of the other guard.
Got it. And that's when you were.
They offered, like, somebody wanted me to sue them, like, but I was like, yeah, you know, it's like equal combat. You know, I feel like if you bite a guy, you deserve to get your arm broken.
A little bit. Did you wind up getting a cast put on it at least, or anything like that? Like,
so it was a fracture right up here, and I just ended up with a sling on it, which made it really hard to slam drugs. Not gonna lie.
Fair enough. So what marked the actual beginning of the end then?
So I had my arm was just getting ready to come out of the cast, and I'd moved. So I was living in Atascadero with my mom and my brother were living upstairs at my aunt and uncle's house, and I was living in the garage, but I wasn't allowed upstairs because I wasn't trustworthy. But there was 2 little chihuahuas upstairs. Still to this day, that upsets me that the chihuahuas had more house privileges than I did. So my mom got a house in Morro Bay, and she needed money to move in, and so I like moved a bunch of stuff around. Well, I didn't move stuff around. I got someone to front me a large amount of drugs. I sold those drugs instead of using them, and then instead of paying that guy back, I put the money down on the place for my mom. So I had a place to live that was inside and not in a garage, and so I'd really burned myself, though, because I was like the last person who was dumb enough to front me anything. So I was in trouble already to begin with, but I figured I'd just go to the bar, and then I had like $150 left over, and I was going to head down to the bar. I was going to crack some jokes. I was going to sell some fake drugs, and I was going to go on with my life. But I had already decided at this point, because I tried to quit a couple of times on my own, and it never went well. And how that would go is I would be like, okay, I'm done. And I would mean it. I meant it with every bit, every ounce I was, every cell in my body. I was like, I am done doing drugs and drinking. This shit is ruining my life. And then I just end up doing the same thing I was doing. Like, it'd be that night, I'd find myself sitting there, and I didn't have a job. So it was through great effort that I would find myself sitting there doing drugs, doing the thing I swore I would never do. And I would have no idea how it got there. Like, what happened to my resolve? And that happened so many times that I just gave up on quitting. I was like, you know what? This hurts. You quit quitting. Yeah, I did. Because it hurt my feelings every time I couldn't quit. And I was like, well, I'm just going to stop hurting my own feelings then, and just accept that the hook is set. I'm going to do this until I die, and I just might as well be all right with it. So that was my mindset, right? And then, but I'd been to AA a couple of times. I actually had a heart attack at the meeting room once. But I was like, I think everybody made more of a big deal about it than I was. I felt like I would have been just fine. And I was going by that meeting room, and I had $150 in my pocket, and I was like, fuck, like it's 12 o'clock. I'm not going to be able to drink until the people that are willing to buy fake drugs get there. This is it. This is like the end of the rope for me again. I'm going to have to do something to come up with a large amount of money. And I was like, well, I'll just cut inside this room and get some jokes from the quitters. And then I'll be able to last like an hour and a half longer because I'll get an hour and a half later start. And I go in there and I sit in the back, and this guy sits next to me, and his name was Daryl. Daryl sits next to me, and I know Daryl before because I had when I had that heart attack I was telling you about, it was like one in the room was followed up by one that I had caused myself from doing uppers and downers, and everybody had taken all my shit when I was in the hospital. So I got out of the hospital, and all I owned was a pair of Dickie shorts. I didn't own shoes. I didn't have a real shirt. I didn't have anything. So I had a hospital shirt on that I was wearing around, like a button up with no buttons, and a pair of foam flip-flops that they gave me at the hospital. And I went to this AA meeting because they had given me a pamphlet at the meeting at the hospital when I told them that I didn't do the things that they said I was doing. And that's where I met Carol the first time. Him and this other guy, this big guy, Trevor, cornered me outside the meeting. And I literally, there was no way out. They trapped me by the door. And they're like, hey, man, AA can give you what you want. And I was like, I just want my shoes back. I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. And I stayed in AA for 3 days, got my shoes back, and went right back to what I was doing. But that guy was at that meeting, and he sat down next to me. And there was nobody sitting next to me. Like, I was sitting by the back door. I looked like a feral animal. Like, nobody was reaching their hand out to me at all.
Is this at the Morro Bay, the blue one next to the park there?
Yeah, this is at the Harbor Lights group.
Yep.
And I had like a little bit of a reputation at the Harbor Lights group. I had showed up in a blackout one time and talked about doing, well, my sexcapades of the night before. Had to be escorted out.
Yeah. Matt and the Magic Carrot or something like that, you know?
Yeah. That mouth just went into AA and just decided to check if those people were as patient as they said they were.
You found the line.
Yeah. So Daryl offered to buy me a big book, right? And I didn't know. First of all, it sounded expensive. It was a big book, right? I had no idea that it was only $6. That may not have been as impactful at the time. So I figured this guy went and bought me like a $40 book, and he didn't want anything out of me. He just pointed out a story in the back. He said, acceptance is a key. So this guy reminds me of you, which I thought was horseshit because I considered myself to be original. And I was just blown away, man, that some guy who didn't really know me was going to spend money and give me something to make me a little smarter, to try to make my life a little bit better for no other reason. So I felt like I needed to honor his gift. So I didn't go to the bar. I went home. I read that story. He said that he was going to be at the 8:00 meeting. So I went to that 8:00 meeting. I didn't go there with the intention of staying in AA. I went there with the intention of breaking up with him. Like, I wanted to tell him, like, hey, I read the story, I relate, but you don't understand. I've tried to quit. It's not possible.
Thanks for the overly large book. I do appreciate it. Here it is. I want to give it back to you. I no longer need this thing.
No, well, I thought it was expensive. I wasn't going to give it back.
Oh, okay. But you at least wanted to like give him some sort of like, you know what? I really appreciate the gesture, and I read that.
Yeah, I wanted him to know that I read it, and also that we were breaking up and he shouldn't talk to me again.
Got it.
Okay, I appreciate it. You're just not my type. This book was large. It smells a little weird. I'm pretty sure it's moldy.
It's got weird language.
Instead, I asked him to be my sponsor. And man, when I said that, I got that same feeling in the pit of my stomach from when that time I told that cop I fucked his wife. They're like, oh shit, I did it again. Like,
this is that time though that your mouth actually worked. It worked.
Yeah, 1 out of 200. It's like, and then I remember I even like relaxed my jaw, like, oh, he's gonna hit me. Well, I want to keep my teeth.
I'm surprised with the amount of fights you've been in. I am shocked that you have your teeth, man.
Yeah, they knocked this one out, and then you just turn your head down a little bit, and I'm little, so like I get punched in the eye a lot.
Fair enough. So
I'm
he
blind.
says yes to sponsoring you.
Yeah, but he had stipulations. He's like, I will, but you have to be willing to work the steps, and you got to be willing to do the first step tomorrow. He's like, that's your deal. And you can't drink in between. Like, you just got to do that step. And I was like, all right, well, I'll do it. I figured, like, all right, there's 12 steps. Some smart guy. It should take me about 3 days. Like, I'll have this whole thing down, and then I can tell him, this didn't work out. I tried it. It didn't work out. And we go down to work the first step. And I thought it was like this big, like, serendipitous thing. I went down to the rock. I'm like, I used to do drugs down here all the time. But later I realized that because everywhere we went is somewhere I used to do drugs. It's a small town, and I was a dirty creature. There's not a fucking bathroom in this town that I didn't slam drugs in. So we went, and my deal was I didn't really think I was an alcoholic, right? I thought I was a drug addict. Like, that was pretty clear. But I thought if I could just, smoke things that grew in the dirt and only drink alcohol, that I would be all right in my life. And we went over it. And I had to be the worst sponsee because I was open and I didn't argue with the points he said, but I had a lot of yeah, buts. So he'd say something and I'd be like, yeah, but that doesn't really pertain to me. And then like, yeah, but I really don't want to stop drinking. I just want to stop slamming drugs and getting my face smashed in by everybody who doesn't think I'm funny. And
so you go down, you do the step, and every time you're doing the step, you're like, man, okay, I'm going to do this step, and then I'm going to finally be able to break up with them. Like, we're not moving in together, like I'm like, so you're like, it's like, did you ever just accept it and get excited about doing it?
After the first step I did, because once what happened was I made this connection, right? So he pointed out, he said, so when you go to the bar and you just drink, like, how does it go? And then I was like, all right, well, I guess, kind of follows the same pattern. I go to the bar, I start having about one or two, I get to the third one and I get that itch and I'm like, oh, and I start, making some phone calls, and I make phone calls until about the sixth one. And then by that time I start leaving irate voicemails, and then I get to around the seventh or the eighth one and I decide that, well, if they're not answering their phone, they're not home, I'm going to go throw a brick through their window and help myself. And it goes like that every time. I always find myself trying to break into somebody's house to steal shit that I want. And I was like, well, I guess that does make me an alcoholic, and this is all one big problem, and there's a chance that I might be able to not live my life this way. And I was like, it was good dope, man, that I might not have to live my life this way. Like, just the realization that I only had one problem and I only had to work with one solution to try to fix it. I was all about it. I was real scared though about that second step. I didn't know what was going to happen, man. I didn't know if he was going to dunk my head underwater, or we're going to sacrifice a pigeon, or like, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I just knew it was going to be weird and I didn't want to do it. And I went down there, and that was the first thing I told him when we get in their car, and he like takes me up to the top of Black Hill. And I was like, oh, this looks exactly like where you would sacrifice something. And I tell him, I'm like, hey man, I'm not joining your club, dude. I'm not sacrificing any pigeons, man. You're not dunking my head underwater. I'm not drinking your holy water. I'm not taking any. You better keep your pants on. Like, I'm not comfortable with this. And he just laughed at me, man. He just laughed right in my face for a long, long time. Like, holding his sides, laughing.
I'll bet.
Yeah. I was like, man, you're lucky you're big, because you are hurting my feelings right now. And then we just talked about it and talked about it. And I got to this point where I left it at there was a maybe. So I just didn't say no, right? I didn't say no, there's not. I'm not making my mind about this. I said, maybe there might be. And it's grown exponentially from that small granule of a spiritual belief.
Maybe there might be. That is the weeniest confession of a higher power. Maybe there might be. That was enough. I can't believe it.
Yeah, that got it from there, just not saying no. And then just, so when I first lost my vision, right, I was struggling. Every day was a struggle. The world was uncomfortable again. I felt like I was walking around covered in saran wrap, and I couldn't have a connection with another human being. And every day I would wake up and I would crawl to the end of my bed, and I'd put both my feet on the ground, and I'd look at both my feet on the ground, and I would look around at the room, and I would just kind of like kaleidoscope around, and I would think, I should just kill myself. This is pointless. And then I would try to find a beam like around it, and I'd be like, you know what? It seems like a lot of work, and I'm too lazy to do it right now. So literally being lazy would stop me from wanting to kill myself. And I would wait till around noon, and I'd say, okay, I need to go to that meeting. And I would tell myself before I leave, I'd say, okay, listen, God, I need you to show yourself to me in a way that I can understand. And I would spend my day looking for a higher power. Everywhere I would look, everything I would see, I would keep my eyes open for something that I could consider a higher power. And it would be anything. It could be a minuscule thing of somebody bringing Splenda so that I could have Splenda in my coffee that they pulled out of their purse, to seeing this kid was riding his bike and he had built a jump, and he's like, goes down this hill and he's like, hey mister, watch me take this jump. And I stop and I watch, and he takes this jump and his back tire never leaves the ground, but he's stoked. And that's like my whole life. Basically me, my back tire never leaves the ground, but I think I'm amazing. And and that was it, you know what I mean? And I saw a higher power in my life that day, you know, like, so every day I asked to see God, and every day I got to see God. And the trick was just that maybe might be. So I just didn't take my mind, critically think it, and try to break it down so I didn't have to believe it. Because I could disprove anything I want, but it takes real cognitive power to not do that.
Like, that's the lazy man's way out.
Yeah.
Like, I think about that sometimes with the higher power thing, you know. They're like, yeah, you could argue anything you want to argue. It's perfectly fine if you want to, but some things I just want to feel in this world, you know. I want to feel God. I don't want to like know that God exists because I'm some sort of like theologian. Like, I want to feel God, you know.
When I lost my eyesight, that the intellectual higher power that I had, okay, this is going to be all right, wasn't enough. I was suffering. I needed to feel an emotion. I needed to feel like I wasn't alone.
How much sobriety did you have when you lost your eyesight?
I had, I think 6 years, 7 years. Yeah, 7 years.
And it was still just like it.
I had a pretty loose, I mean, I had some spiritual experiences that were like I had a really intense one where I pulled over on the side of the road and I was just crying, you know, and it was all because based around my little brother who's been real sick. It looked like we were going to lose him. He was like, he had something go wrong with his medication. He was basically overdosed, and I had to rush him to the hospital, and he didn't know who I was and he didn't know where he was. And I stayed with him and I helped him. And then I was able to be there when he woke up in the middle of the night and he was back to himself. He was like, where am I? And I was able to tell him where he was. And I was driving home from that. And I was just overwhelmed with the feeling that's inexplicable by words. It washed through me. It made me cry. I had to pull over, and I cried. And so I had that. And I just kind of leaned on that the whole time, because that was an intense, powerful spiritual experience. And I was just leaning on that, but that wasn't going to get me through losing my vision. I needed something daily. I needed to see God in my life every day. And then, so I spent my days looking for God, and I looked for God every day for, it was like fucking 6 months.
Do you have any more of those? I'm sorry, but I gotta know, man. I love the kid whose back tire doesn't get off the ground. That's awesome.
So my buddy was paying me to go to work with him. Like, I don't want to say I was working with him, because I'd basically just sit there and crack jokes while he worked. I'd
pay you to crack jokes next to me, man. I'm not gonna lie, I would.
He just knew that I was having a hard time, and he was having a hard time too. And we were kind of helping each other through. His life had fallen apart, and we were helping each other through it. And we had gone out to Paso, and we were driving back, and he's a big guy. Like, he's a really big guy. And we drove through this this like skunk cloud, and I've never seen a human being act more like a bitch when they hear a skunk in my entire life. So he's gagging and I'm cracking up. I'm kicking my feet. Tears are running out of the side of my eyes. I can't breathe. My sides hurt. And he's fucking dying. He's got to pull over on the side of the road to throw up because he swallowed some chew too. So I'm like, it's glee, pure glee, and my mouth won't stop, right? Luckily, he's my friend. And then we pull around, and I hadn't seen the sky in 5 months. I hadn't seen a single star. Every single night I'd looked up, and it's been a black sky, and I hadn't seen it. And I miss that, man. I used to commercial fish. I've seen beautiful just stars like on the side, the sky covered in stars. I've always really liked it. And I was upset that I wasn't going to be able to see it again. And I was all right with it. But we pull over and he's like, hey, man, do you see that? And I can see the stars again, right? And we get out of the car and I go up and I look at the stars and I see one shooting star goes by, and then a second shooting star goes by, and then a third shooting star goes by. And at that point I had that same feeling again. And it was intense and it made me cry. I'm not like, it breaks something loose. And that was pretty intense. That was right towards the end of it too. That's when I was like, all right, I'm going to be able to live my life like this.
I tell you what, just that's so, I'm blown away, dude. I wish that I did that more. Just woke up and said, you know what, here's the deal. If I don't see God today, I'm clocking out at 2. I'm going to see God or I'm going to die today. Like, I don't care. Like, it's what I mean, I don't know that God, I think that God does love ultimatums like that, like, hey, you show up or I'm out and I'll see you tomorrow. All right.
Yeah,
so
the guys watched me my whole life say shit and then do it. So it's just like, God damn, this little asshole. He's gonna do it. He'll do it. I basically said, hey, God, hold my beer.
So you've sponsored a lot of guys, I'm sure, over the years, right?
Yeah, I've sponsored a few of them.
So what do you say to the what do you say to the new guy? Sponsoring.
It depends. I really tell. Basically, what I do is I ask questions, and I ask leading questions, and I just try to get somebody to have a revelation instead of a suggestion. So if I think, like, first of all, I have a little lecture with them in the beginning, and it's like, listen, I will never make a decision for you in your life because I don't know what it is to be you, and if I make your decision for you, I'm robbing you from the opportunity of learning how to make decisions. I will spend all fucking night with you figuring out which decision you want to do. I've had plenty of girlfriends and they never know what they want to eat. I got a fucking ton of experience in this shit. Like, so I'll spend all night for something stupid. I don't know. And then, I work them through it, like the pros and the cons. What do you think you're going to get? What are you scared of? A lot of it comes down to what are you scared of? Because there's indecision, right? The fear of making a decision, which is a horrible decision. And then there's sometimes you need to make no decision. And the way you find out that is, what are you scared about losing? What's stopping you from being able to do that? What's making you want to force your will? What are you scared of losing? And usually it comes down to something that really ties down to one of the primordial fears, So if I'm going to lose something that I believe is mine, whether you own it or not, if you believe it's yours and you think you're going to lose it, you have an emotional response to that loss. Or it's somebody's going to think differently about me. It's going to cause people to think differently about me. That one breaks a lot of people. That one's a brutal one. Or I'm going to lose something that I consider my safety. Like my house, my car, something that you consider that allows my job, finances, comes down to safety. And it comes down to those basic things. And those fears, when we're animals at our heart, when those fears go in through that animal, then we act foolishly. And if you know what you're scared of losing, then you can make a better decision on how you want to move forward. But I can't make that decision for these guys. You know what I mean? I'm not there. I don't know what it is to be them. And that's the most beautiful thing about being a human being, is nobody really knows exactly what it is to be you. We can get some some generalities. We have some similarities. We've done something. We have similar ways of thinking because we're alcoholics. So I can relate to a lot of what they're thinking, but I don't really know what it is to be you. We could have grown up in the same house, on the same block, been born the same minute, ate the same food, done the same things, and had two totally different experiences in this world.
So do you have a lot of compassion then? I mean, it sounds like you're just like, it sounds like you're willing to just really accept people kind of like right wherever it is that they're at. I know, like, for me, like I really struggle with that because I'm always like, yeah, come talk to me. I know the answers. I know what's going on. And at the end of the day, it's like, I know that that's not really what I want. You know what I mean? The idea though, that you can guide somebody or just sit with them long enough till they have a revelation. How do you know when they've had one?
They'll tell you. So a revelation is when you come up with your own idea, right? So a suggestion or an idea that you place in somebody, that's not going to have the same power as somebody who figures it out for themselves. It'll have a higher emotional response, which will allow it to be encoded in their episodic memory deeper. Because they'll remember the things that led to it, how it was, what it felt like, and memory is tied highly to emotion.
So the probable odds that they're going to come up with something that is, we'll call it revelation to you, like it's probably something you've been staring at all night.
It might be something that I thought was the right idea. Yeah. I mean, I could have jumped right in and been like, hey, listen, the 2 girlfriends things is a bad idea. You're fucking stupid. You're stupid, but but if I work all night and they're like, I don't think this is right anymore, then they changed their behavior because they've decided that it's not right anymore. And if they, it takes a long time and it takes a lot of patience, but you got to understand, not everybody starts at the same place. Right? Yep. Like you may have had lessons taught to you by your father, or your experiences that taught you before things went astray that's not the kind of person you want to be. But other people have had to survive and scratch, and they didn't learn those things, and they're starting off brand new, and they need to learn those things. Yeah, no, that is. But like for me, like I grew up in a theology house. My dad, he was a pastor. I grew up with a lot of the religious components, I would say, that AA has. But it wasn't until I found AA that I was like, oh, here, sitting in this room with all these drunk atheists. Wow, this is where the power actually is. It was, it's like you go to church your whole life and you hear about the power of God and you're like, yeah, I totally get it. Then you go to an AA meeting and some atheist shows you what the power of God really is. And that happened to me when I first got sober. The guy leading the Sunday night melody meditation meeting is an atheist. It's like, put that in your pipe and smoke it. You know what I mean? Like, figure that one out. Well, that's because nobody reaches for God like somebody who's in trouble. And alcoholics, we feel we are in trouble quite often. And it's in that reaching and stretching is when you feel like you really are close to God.
There's nothing like seeing a newcomer too that makes you go, boy, I remember that.
Yeah. And also like, man, I'm glad there's soap to wash my hands with.
So you did get your shoes back.
I did get my shoes back. I went door to door because what had happened was they had divvied up my shit.
Good alcoholics.
Yeah. So I was living with a bunch of tweakers and they're like, he's dead. So check it out. I went into the bathroom and I took a shot and it didn't feel right. It was like, oh, that was like, it was a good shot. And then like my arm started going numb and my chest was cramped. Like, I felt like somebody was set a cinder block on my chest. And then my whole arm, I was like having shooting pains in my arm. And I went out and I was just wearing Dickies, like I'd been high for like 4 or 5 days. So I don't know about you, but anytime I did meth, I just smoked my shoes right off my feet. And
I I never did meth.
Yeah, well, it's you tie your shoes tight if you ever try it, because they just boom, I blow them right off. And I told them, right? I was like, hey guys, like my arm hurts and like my chest is like I'm having a hard time breathing. And this guy was like, oh man, you're having a heart attack. And he goes and he pulls out his cell phone, and it was like one of those little flip ones. And I hear him, he calls 911. He says, hey, this guy's having a heart attack. I'm at the Del Mar liquor store. And I'm like, you called the fucking ambulance for me 5 blocks away? like you're a piece of shit, bro. And so I had to walk barefoot, 5 blocks down. And I almost got there, man. I got 4.5 blocks. I got 4.5 blocks. I could see the liquor store. I was like almost there. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take a nap right here on this curb. And so I laid down to take a nap in Morro Bay. And luckily, the ambulance driver saw me when he was pulling into Del Mar and was like, I bet you the guy who needs the help is the guy sleeping on the curb with no shoes and no shirt in 50-degree weather. And they rushed me to the hospital. The doctors were up my ass. They're like, hey, man, you got to stop doing drugs like that. And I was like, hey, I'm not doing it. You guys did this. You poked me 900 times. And they were like, dude, if you don't stop doing what you swear to us you're not doing, you're going to have another heart attack. And I believed him, man. I was like, I probably am. So I left that little hospital bracelet on so that the second time I had a heart attack, people knew what I was doing. They could just hurry up and rush me in there.
just make it easy. I mean, you're so conscientious. You know what I mean? Like, that was very kind of you.
I thought so. And then I went on like a 5-day bender, and I was coming down, and I don't know if you know this, but they put like snacks out on the Sunday meetings and stuff. So like usually there's like little cookies and tea and coffee. So I went to the Harbor Lights meeting, all strung out, coming down. And I started having another heart attack in there, and I'm like laying on this table. I got my head down, and I could feel the symptoms starting again. And I was like, I'm going to have a heart attack in front of all these old weirdos. And everybody just thought I was coming down off of booze, and they kept putting coffee and sugar in front of my face. So I go into the back room by the cabinets to take a nap, because apparently when I'm about to die from a heart attack, I really want to get a nap in. And I'm back there and I'm trying to sleep, and some lady comes up and she's literally poking me in the neck and the face like, hey, you got to wake up. And so I got mad at her and I was like, I'm having a heart attack. Leave me the fuck alone. And she saw the hospital bracelet and it did what it was supposed to do. She freaked out and brought me to the hospital.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And she was on a women's retreat from Visalia. Because nobody in Morro Bay would have come back there to poke me in the face.
They'd have been like, it's just Matt taking a nap over there.
Yeah, like, well, he's quiet. Like, don't wake him up. He's fucking quiet. That's a plus. And then I saw that lady when I was like 9 months sober. She came back again for another retreat. And I was in the meeting and she didn't recognize me because I'd cleaned up a little bit. And she was sharing about the last time she was at Morro Bay. She had to rush some poor soul who wasn't meant long for this world. And I just started laughing. I couldn't stop myself. I started laughing. I raised my hand. It's on me. It's me. I'm the poor soul. She was so excited. It was like she met a star. I just wish she was hotter.
Stop it. Okay. All right. Here we go. So, last piece of advice that you would, is there anything you could have ever said to young Matt, or something that you would say to Matt who's been sober for his first, say, week or so?
So the two things that were said to me that got rooted into me were by my dad. So my dad's been sober for 20 something years now. And me and my dad went to go surfing down in Malibu, and I got dope sick, and Malibu was going off. It was like 6 to 8 feet. There was only like 20 people in the water. It's like Malibu, how you dream about it. And I started paddling out, and then I was dope sick. So I started puking. I couldn't make it out. I started puking, and that's like not my, usually I've surfed some pretty big surf with my dad. So I ended up sleeping it off in the car, and my dad gets done with the surf session and he's just dripping in surf stoke. he's beaming from ear to ear, and he looks at his drug addict son, dope sick in the car, and he could have said anything he wanted to me at that point. But he just said, man, I'm so glad I'm not on drugs, and just like kept rolling with his day, and it hurt. And right then and there, I rolled over, and I was like, I got to stop doing this. I got to stop doing this. And I got to stop doing this is like, it really stuck with me. And then another one that he had said to me when I was talking to him, because I'd call my dad all the time. After my dad put me in rehab, I made a decision that I was never going to lie to him again. So I'd call him up and ask him for money, and he'd ask me if I was on drugs, and I'd tell him stuff like, well, only when I got them. Like, but I don't have them right now, so technically no. But if you put some in front of me, yeah, I'm gonna be on drugs. And he said, why don't you just try AA for a year, dude? Why don't you just give it a shot for a year and see how your life is and make a decision from there? And so that one, and then I got to get off these drugs. When I went to that meeting, that guy gave me the book. Those things were in the back of my head. So those two advice for so young Matt when he's out there, those are life-changing events.
Wow. All right. Matt, it's so good to hear your story, man.
No, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I mean, dude, it was an honor. It's been such a privilege listening to you tonight, dude.
No, well, thanks for asking me, man. I appreciate you putting this out there.
Yeah, we're going to get this thing out there. Traveling party.